Welcome back to PSHE Year 8. This is lesson 2 of your Staying Sane final topic of the year. There are 2 more lessons of this left. And before I tell you what today's lesson is about, I have got a little starter activity for you. I want you to have a look at the 6 images that you can see on your screen. They are 6 people or groups of people who have something in common. So I'd like you to pause this video. You might want to get your friends or family to give you a hand with this, see if they've got any ideas. What do these 6 people have in common? So pause this video, have a think about it, and then press play when you think you've got an idea. If you haven't worked it out, and it's quite a strange one, the thing that all of these people have in common is failure. Like most people, they didn't have things come easy to them. So the people that we've got in these pictures is Oprah Winfrey, who started off being rejected from almost every job that she was ever interviewing for, and is now the most famous talk show presenter in all of the US and one of the richest women in all of the US. We have Albert Einstein, who was quite famously he was a slow developer, I think is the term that was used at the time. He didn't learn to talk until he was about 5, and was very slow learning to walk and doing things. And people actually thought that he was going to really struggle with life, but actually, as you know, he turned out to be one of the most important and influential scientists that ever existed. We've got Walt Disney in the top right there, who had all of his ideas for his early Disney films and Disney characters rejected. We've got the Colonel Sanders, who had to basically start his own business from scratch after lots of failing businesses. When he was in his 50s, he had $100 and his secret recipe and managed to create the KFC empire from there. We've got the Beatles, who were rejected from the first few record labels that they auditioned for and took them a long time to find success. And then you've got Jay-Z, who again was told that his music wasn't mainstream enough, and that by the time he started making the type of music he did, apparently it wasn't fashionable music anymore, it wasn't popular music anymore, but he's now one of the richest musicians in the world. So all of these people have had to go through a lot of failure before finding success, and their ability to bounce back from that failure is what's made them as successful as they are today. Either strategies to help you prevent disappointment, so things that you can do to make sure that you can sometimes avoid some of these failures. You can't always avoid them, but sometimes you can. Or they are things to help you deal with failure when it does happen. So you need to please sort these cards, and you can either do that if you're able to by printing them off, cutting them out and putting them in 2 different piles, or highlighting them in 2 different colours, or just writing them out in 2 different columns. That's absolutely fine. So as I keep saying, you are almost certainly going to face some kind of setback, some kind of disappointment in your life. I'm not sure I could tell you anybody who I know who has always had everything their own way, always got everything that they wanted, never been told no, never been turned away for something. So it's important that you know how to deal with those setbacks and how to deal with them so that it makes sense to you, that you can understand why you didn't get that particular opportunity, and more importantly, how you can make sure that you do succeed in the next opportunity. So, as with last week's lesson, some of these things will work for you, some of these things won't. But activities like journaling, so keeping a diary of what happens in your life and how you feel about that particular thing, um, practicing gratitude, that's a bit of a kind of airy fairy way of basically just saying, remember that not everything in your life is terrible. Not everything in your life you're a failure at. What is going well? What have you succeeded at that day? Sometimes it can be something like, I got up and I put some clothes on today instead of staying in my pajamas all day. Remembering those little wins, the quick wins that make the difference, rather than focusing on the things that haven't gone so well. Putting things into perspective is really important as well. Asking questions like, how is this going to affect my life in a week's time or a year's time? A lot of the things we see as failures on a day-to-day basis, realistically, in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, you're not even going to remember they happened. They're not important events in your life. They might seem like it at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not really going to affect you. So when I was about 12 years old, I failed my cycling proficiency test. I didn't even know you could do that until I did. And I was absolutely devastated at the time because all of my friends passed. I felt like a right numpty. But now I look back at it and I think, wow, it's not really affected my life in any possible way. So keeping things in perspective is really important. Reframing disappointments, again, another kind of airy fairy way of just saying to yourself, okay, this didn't go particularly well. Why didn't it go particularly well? Was there anything that I could have done to have improved? Was it a test that I just wasn't prepared for, that I just tried to wing it? How can I make sure that the next time I'm not going to make that same mistake? Whilst there's a range of helpful things that you can do or say to yourself in those situations, there's also a range of unhelpful things, and these are things that people quite often turn to doing after they've been disappointed or let down. And these are things like ignoring it, completely burying it, and saying to yourself, yeah, it's absolutely fine, but really you're kind of holding in some resentment, some anger about it. Shouting at other people, taking it out on other people is so easy to do, and to think, well, it's my brother's fault that I didn't do very well on that test because he was being really noisy and annoying and I couldn't do revision the night before. Ultimately, most of the time it is your fault that you've missed out on that opportunity or not got that opportunity, and there will be a reason for it. In some more extreme circumstances, and maybe when you're potentially a little bit older, things like turning to drinking, to alcohol, or maybe even to drugs to manage your feelings, that doesn't manage your feelings, it just kind of buries them for a short period of time. And when you've then stopped drinking or stopped using drugs, and you come to that realization that actually that situation still happened, and now you are also feeling terrible about it and feeling terrible in yourself, actually just makes things worse and can make you make some pretty poor decisions as well. So your next task, year 9, is I would like you to make a little flow diagram, or you could call it a decision tree. So I'd like you to come up with a scenario where somebody, it could be someone real, someone made up, a character from a TV program, they've had some kind of setback, some kind of disappointment, big or small. And I'd then like you to choose two different courses of action. One that would be a good way of dealing with that disappointment, and one that would be not such a good way of dealing with that disappointment. So here we've got Tara, who's upset because she feels like she's being left out by her friends. One option being she has a go at her friends and then proceeds to ignore them, takes it out on her friends. And that's not going to end well because it's just going to upset her friends even more. And then she's almost definitely not going to be invited to the next thing that they do because they feel like she's kind of a bit, on edge maybe. The more positive thing that Tara could do would be to actually ask her friends why they didn't invite her, or to just kind of make it clear that she'd really like to be invited to the next one. They do invite her to the next one. It was probably some sort of little mistake that they just forgot to add her, or that they were talking about something they thought she wouldn't want to be involved with. Tara has a great evening and everything's back to being good. So I want you to come up with a scenario, one good way of dealing it, one bad way of dealing it, and what would the outcome be. So pause this video, have a go at writing that down, and then click play again. Your final activity for today then, Year 9, is I'd like us to go full circle back to the first thing that we did in our last lesson together, which was to come up with an A to Z list of things that can affect your well-being, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about life, positively or negatively. The things that can have a positive impact, I want you to put a nice little tick or a smiley face next to them. And for the negative things, how could you deal with them? How could you rewrite that sentence to explain, how you could improve that situation, how you could reframe your negative? So could you change B is for bullying to B is for being honest with people? It sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's going to help you kind of understand how you can take those situations and you can look at them in a different way to stop you just seeing them as failures and negatives in your life. As always in PSHE, there are lots of other places that you are able to go to for further support. There's all of the usual places we point you to: Childline, Young Minds, Samaritans. You can always talk to people at school. You can always talk to teachers. It doesn't have to be your form tutor or anything like that. There are lots of people who are available, even in times like this, especially in times like this, for you whenever you need to talk to somebody. And if you don't feel like you can talk to somebody in school, there's lots of places outside of school. All of these links here you should be able to find nice and easily. If you've got any questions about this lesson or anything that we've talked about over the last couple of lessons, please do get in touch via email, and I will see you next week.